So this is the door of no return. And at the time of the slave trade, the sea was closer to the castle. But due to the rotation of the earth, the sea has receded back. So smaller boats will be coming here and taking them to the waiting ship. From here, the Portuguese were taking the slave to Brazil, Ecuador, Panama, Honduras. And the Dutch were taking the slave to America, Suriname, Guyana, Haiti, and what have you. When they were trading, with the time of the barter trade, the door was larger. But when attention shifted into slave trade, they just narrowed it all for easy counting and easy control of our ancestors.
Hello, beautiful people. This is your favorite guy, Raymond Eche Agbalanyo, and today I welcome you to Elmina Castle, one of the oldest architecture or castle in West Africa. Today, we are going to learn a history about what happened in there. It is very sad, but sit tight, but make sure you have hanky or a face towel to wipe your tears. It is indeed sad story.
Elmina Castle here. This castle is called St. George's Castle, popularly known as Elmina Castle, built by the Portuguese in 1482. But they arrived here in 1471 to trade, spread the Christianity, and also extend their territories outside Europe. So whilst they were coming here, they came along with some of their European goods, tobaccos, gunpowder, schnapps, used clothes, with the exchange of the goods we have here, ivory, spices, and gold. And this form of trade was called the barter trading. So through the numerous supply of gold, the locals were given to the Portuguese. They had the impression that this town has a lot of gold. So they named this town Almina. Almina in the Portuguese language meaning the mine. But through the pronunciation of the name Almina by the locals, the name was corrupted into Elmina. But the original name of this town before the arrival of the Portuguese was called Anomansa. Anomansa simply means inexhaustible supply of water. With the Portuguese leader called Dom Diego de Zambuja and the 600 men, they started building a castle. Initially, the king at that time, called Anomansa, was not ready to give them a plot of land. He felt that culture differences might be a problem in the future. And as a traditional ruler, he said something, I quote, "Friends are better friends when they don't live together. But upon persuasion and assurance, he gave them a plot of land here and they built the castle for two main reasons. As a trade post where they can store their European goods and also a rooms for their missionaries to continue spreading the Christianity until 1500 when the attention shifted into slave trade. Why? Because at that time, the Spaniard, they had entered into the New World. So into the New World, they have opened tobaccos, plantations. They want the what? They want the riches, but they are not ready to do the hard labor. So they subjected the natives for the work. And history say, European diseases, brutality of the work, decimated indigenous population. And one man who is accused, a supposedly Catholic priest called Bartholomew de las Cascas, who had a sympathy for the natives for placing a black man. That's why the attention shifted into slave trade. But 1471 was not the first time Europeans having a contact with Africans. 1441, they have been in Senegal. And Senegal, they took 10 men to Portugal. 10 men they took, 3 of them said to be a noble background. So they need to bring them back and return the Portuguese gold and human being. So 1441 in Senegal, 1471 in Ghana. That's why we have perception that they never built the castle here for barter trade alone, rather slave trade. Because in 1441, They already taken me from Senegal before they came here in 1471. And then in 1596, the Dutch made their first attempt to capture the castle from the seaside. They failed. 1612, they will build their fort in a town called Mori, 25 kilometers from here. They were trading with the locals over there. They had a profit. The Portuguese were getting from the trade. 1625, they were making a second attempt. They also failed. Locals here became fed up with the Portuguese. Locals felt that when the Dutch took over the castle, they're going to stop slave trade. So with the help of locals in 1637, from the inland attack, the Dutch captured the castle. When the Dutch captured the castle, they expanded it and started taking more slaves. 1807, British abolished slave trade in their parliament, not in Africa. 1808, America did the same thing. 1814, the Dutch. But those who were doing the actual thing here never stopped. So it turned into something called illegal slave trade until the latter part of 1872. They abolished slave trade. When they abolished slave trade, the castle here became unprofitable to the Dutch. So the Dutch had to swap possession with the British. Dutch took over British, one of their forts, in northern Sumatra, Indonesia, and British took over the castle here. When British took over the castle here, they never used this castle for slave trade. They were using the Cape Coast castle for slave trade. Here, the British used the castle purposely for administration center. When at the time of the Second World War, they recruited young men from all West African English-speaking countries, brought them to the castle here, trained them, and sent them to Burma in India to fight for them. And we call them Royal West African Frontier Force. After the Second World War, the same structure was used as a police training school. In 1957, when Ghana gained independence, we took over the castle. So at the time of the Portuguese, they used this structure here for 155 years. The Dutch, 235, British, 85. And Ghana have used the castle for 68 and still counting. So as at now, this structure is 543 years. First and the largest European building in sub-Saharan Africa. In 1979, it was designated as a World Heritage Site by the UNESCO. So the introduction of the tour. Question? Having a question?
I just want to make sure. 1879.
1872, they abolished slave trade.
But, okay, that's pretty late.
Yes.
I was like,
Yes.
I thought like,
1872. Yes. They abolished slave trade.
When did you say the castle was built?
The year?
Yeah,
1482.
82.
So, but the castle was built in phases. Portuguese started building a castle. When the Dutch took over, they continued. So the castle, whenever you see the red bricks, it's from Portugal side of the building, and the yellow side is from the Dutch. It's a continuation of the building. Yes. Yes. Any question? All right. So this structure we found ourselves here used to be a church built by the Portuguese. They were Catholics, but when the Dutch captured the castle, the Dutch were Protestants. So the Dutch never used this church. Rather, they will divide the church into two. The top room as their soldiers' mess, where their soldiers eat and drink. And the down room as an auction room, where they buy slaves. But when the British took over the castle, the same place was turned into police training school. But right now, it's a museum. Life as a captive was difficult in every stage. Being in the dungeons here was worst, but being in the ships was brutal because they were packed like books, one is to other. And whenever there's a shortage of food, they will start throwing human beings into the ocean. So people died in the ships than in the dungeons. In the dungeons alone, 1/3 survived for every 3 months for 400 years. So imagine the ships, from the ship to the plantation. And people do come in that the slave trade was a profit to the Europeans. But why that treatment? You know, Africans were very strong, so it's a system to suppress you so that they can't fight back. And also to free themselves from a guilt, they develop a method that Those who are able to survive in the various dungeons here, they are very strong to work in a plantation. So it's a hello, you're welcome. Have a seat. So it's a way to so there's a seat here. So yes, it's a way to eliminate the weaker one from the strong ones. As they are doing that, they were dying. This is the castle, and that's the fort. Fort Saint Jago, built by the Dutch in 1665. So, with the help of the locals in 1637, from the inland attack, when the Dutch captured the castle, they built a fort there to protect the castle from any attacks. That's why the Dutch spent more years than any other European country. So, once you are done with our introduction, you're going to start the walking tour. So, please. Yes, yes.
Um, Before the Europeans arrived,
Yes.
we were fighting each other, right? Tribe against tribe,
Yes.
and capturing
Yes.
people
Yes.
so that they said that slaves
Yes.
in war.
Yes.
What role did my chiefs, like the Ashantis, the Achims, the Akwemos, play in this slavery?
Okay. All right. So there's a lot of ways the Europeans were used to capture our ancestors. First of all, they were using force capturing human beings by force. But the Africans were fighting against. So the attention shifted into raid and attacks. They will set fire in your homes. Whilst I'm moving outside, they captured the gunpoint. And some of the Africans were working with Europeans to gather Africans. People do come in that Africans were selling their own family members, which is never true because at that time, family members was limited to a tribe, lineage, or a kingdom. So once you're not part of a kingdom or tribe, they see you as an outsider. So two tribes having a war, when one able to defeat the other tribe, they became a prisoners of war and they selling it to Europeans, but they're their own tribe people. That's brought a lot of slaves to Europeans because they came to conquer already divided people. So once you have a gun and gunpowder, you can arrange an attack on another tribe and be sending them to Europeans as slaves. This mentality of Africans to become one, it's just recent. So divided and conquer was already existing in African societies. That's why the Europeans were smart in one direction, bringing in guns and gunpowder. With a gun and gunpowder, you attack another tribe. Once they've forgotten that the opposite, because so per what you are saying, they play a role. But so what was it, the greedy ones working with the Europeans to capture their own people? Once they've forgotten that they are one, because of the intertribals, they see themselves as different from the other tribe. So if you're not part of their tribe, they see you as an outsider. Because if they are one, it will be difficult for someone to penetrate. So the more we get a lot of intertribal wars, the more a lot of slaves were taken. Okay. So no question, we are going to start the walking tour. So all the down rooms at the time of the barter trade, that's where they keep in the European goods. But the attention shifted into slave trade. The down rooms was converted into dungeons. So the peak of the slave trade, 600 men were shared among those down here. In the top rooms here, you saw the priest, merchant, and the soldiers were living. The last baton room is for deputy governor. And the last room is for the governor himself. So in this case here, your position depends on where you live. Now your position, how you're going to live. And on the top here, we have a two watchtower. The watchtower was built by the Dutch to protect the castle from the seaside whenever an attack. But when the British took over the castle, the two watchtower was turned into a prison where they held one of the Ashanti's king, Colonial in 1896 from here to Freetown, from Freetown to Shores. 1924, he came back to Ghana. 7 years later, he died. Just last year, they celebrated 100 years of come back to Ghana. And they also held one of their queen mother, Yasantua, in 1900 from here to Freetown, from Freetown to Shores. By Yasantua died at Seychelles. 2000, her remains was brought back to Ejiso, the hometown in Ashanti region, to be reburied back. We have a buttress, one here, another side here, a buttress to strengthen the castle from not collapsing. But the wheels or the metals on the top, that's where their police used to train their muscles. So they climb top and down for the exercise of the muscles. For the exercise of their muscles. So you see the red bricks. It represents the Portuguese side and the yellow on the side. And also the wooden aspects have been a changes, but the castle itself, no cement or iron ore, just the bricks. They brought it mixing with seashells and palm oil. Yes, no cement on this castle. And they built the castle on the sedimentary rock. Sedimentary rock. That's why imagine it's still existing up to date. The female section of the dungeon, and all the rooms share combined total for 400 women. In the male side, 600. So in all, every 3 months, 1,000 human beings were taken to the New World. And the slave trade lasted for 400 years. 3 months because petrol and the diesel was not available. So the ships were using the wind to travel. So from Europe to Africa, it's a 3 month journey. Let's come this side. So you missed the introduction, so I'll give you the introduction. Yes, water. All right, so water reservoir built by the Portuguese. So the tube was connected whenever it rains. They store the water here for domestic use. When the Europeans came here, they never came along with their wives because they were dying out of malaria and yellow fever to the extent that the coastal land of Africa was termed as a white man grave. So because of that, they were abusing the women in the various dungeons here. Governors, soldiers, and merchants. But the governor with the position will stand back on here, direct to bring some of the women into the courtyard. The governor will select the selected women because you have been in the dungeon for a month. You need to be brought in outside here and wash. After washing here, they will pass you to the private access to the governor's bedroom to be raped.
You say it so succinctly that it sounds palatable.
Not. Please, let's come in. There's a space here. Let's come. Where the selected women passed to the governor's bedroom to be raped. But when the ship arrived for the 3 months' time, due to the rape, some of the women became pregnant. So those who are pregnant, they will build a brick house for them outside the castle. When they delivered, they brought the children here and they gave them formal education. And they had mixed race children. And they bear the father's name. So in the coastal land of Africa, that's where the Europeans' names are coming here. We have names like Van der Poel, Van Dyke, Johnson, Ferguson, Wilson, Dier, what have you. Yes, yes. And okay. And they kept the children here for their own benefit. Through education, they brainwashed them that they're not Africans because of their skin color. So the children continue to become the governors, soldiers, and the merchants. And the women, depending on your strength, those who stay here longer became mistresses in the dungeons. Some were taken as slaves, some were freed. And some of the women refused not to obey the governor. So they punished them. Let's see the punishments they gave to them. and it weighs 25 kg, equivalent to 50 pounds. Those who refuse not to obey the governor, chains or shackles was connected to the cannonball with your hands or your legs. You'll be standing here from morning to evening without food or water. When you become weak, from here to the governor's bedroom, to be raped, to serve as an example for those in the dungeons. Whenever the governor called, you need to obey. So at the church over there built by the Portuguese, they were Catholics. But when the Dutch came, the Dutch were Protestants. So the Dutch never used the church over there. Rather, they built their own church on the top here. They are worshiping God here, and human beings were suffering at the down here. But when the British took over the castle, they maintained the church and renamed it John Wesley Church. So this is the first Methodist church before moving to Cape Coast, the first Methodist church. A touch here. The largest female slave dungeon, and about 150 women were kept in here. When the women were brought in the dungeons here, they were not allowed to go outside the dungeons. So containers was placed in the corner of the room for them to ease themselves. But being in the dungeons here for 1 to 2 months, sleeping on a hard floor, most of the women became weak. And some of the women were not from Ghana alone. Some were captured in Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Togo. Walking from that distance, crossing rivers, mountains, when they reach here, they became weak to the extent that they were able to have an access to various containers 3 months before the ship arrived. So once the door was closed and Western their already conditions, and we all say that may those who died, may their soul rest in perfect peace. The wreaths brought by a Portuguese woman just last year, and I was saying that I'm a Portuguese woman who want to ask forgiveness in the name of my ancestors to all African people who affected the pain of slavery. I'm sorry, my soul cries with you, and my voice joins yours. Together we make the memory. Just last year, we brought it. We are the one of the female slave dungeon, and here about 150 women were kept here. So 150 over there, 150 here, and this side 400 for 400 years every 3 months. And the castle was built in phases. As I said, Portuguese started building the castle. When the Dutch took over, they continued. So in the castle here, whenever you see the red bricks, it's from Portugal, and the yellow bricks here is from Dutch. When they were coming here, they came along with these bricks to give balance to their ships. But in the returning back, human beings will place the balance. The clothes on the floor here, it is not original. 3rd July 2015, 44 Africans from all over the continent came here to dramatize what happened to our ancestors. And doing the drama, they spent 12 hours here. 12 hours spent here. No one defecated here. Just urine alone. We cannot stay in the dungeons here for 1 week. So imagine the time of the slave trade, where they were doing everything on the floor for 3 months before the ship arrived. This is the original bus. This is the original bus. But because it's as rusted, we have replaced the wood. And also the beams. These two is original beams. And the tray over here, 1, 2, 3, is also original. Apart from that, there have been changes on the beams at the top there. All right, we are moving on. Those who survived here, that is the passage to the door of no return. At the time of the slave trade, there was a staircase here to the door of no return. But when the British took over the castle, they never used this castle for slave trade. So remove the staircase over here and turn this place into drainage. So whenever it rains, water pass here to the door of no return. Today we're not going to use the side to the door of no return. We're going to use the men's side to the door of no return. All right, so we are the one of the male slave dungeon, and about 150 men were kept in here. The men were in shackles, but the female were in tags for identification. This room here, that's the branding room or identification room. When a ship arrived, they need to identify our ancestors. So metal was put in hot fire with their symbol to identify them, like a tattoo. Your back and your chest. Most of them died out of the shots from the hot metal. In the top here, that's the peephole. They'll be at the top there, peeping down here. At the time of the slave trade, we are one of the merchants, Mr. and Mrs. Barclays. After the slave trade, they opened a Barclays Bank. You know Barclays Bank? So most of the old banks were merchants. So the profit they gained from the slave trade, that's the European banks. From here, yes, yes. From here, but when the British took over the castle, they removed the staircase over here and turned it into drainage. So whenever it rains, water passes here to the door of no return. This particular room is where family members can meet. They can capture a whole family at the time of war. When they brought into dungeons here, they separated them because of procreation. When the ship arrived, the female pass here, the male pass here, they all meet here to the door of no return. So unable to survive in the various dungeons here, you can meet your wife and your children here, a friend you know for the last time, from here to the door of no return. We are moving to the door. So this is the door of no return. And at the time of the slave trade, the sea was closer to the castle. But due to the rotation of the earth, the sea has receded back. So smaller boats will be coming here and taking them to the waiting ship. From here, the Portuguese were taking the slave to Brazil, Ecuador, Panama, Honduras. And the Dutch were taking the slave to America, Suriname, Guyana, Haiti, and what have you. When they were trading, which is the time of the barter trade, the door was larger. But when attention shifted into slave trade, they just narrowed it all for easy counting and easy control of our ancestors because they'll be in shackles and we're counting one by one into the ship.
So what, were they jumping straight?
No, the sea was closer. So smaller boats, small will come and take them. No, that's what I'm saying that it's very high. So
So they'll roll them.
yeah, the ship, the smaller boats will come here, right? And the sea was closer, and the tide is very high at that time, so it makes the going easy. Yes, so that you'll be in the smaller boat before they reach there. And now back here, we Africans believe that our ancestors, their spirits are still here. So whenever comes here, we pour libation to them, and we will return. We're going to return back to where we came from. The history, we can never use a day to tell. Never. Because 1 hour tour will never enough. Because before the Europeans came here, Arabs and the Northern Berbers were in Africa for over 1,300 years. We call that one Saharan slave trade. That's why in Africa we have the Islamic religion, the Christian religion, because Arabs were here before the Europeans came. And also Africans were practicing their own indentured servant. You owe someone, you can't pay. You go with someone to serve. It's already in the system before the Europeans came. We can never use a day to tell the history. So there's a book I always recommend for visitors. This book I've read it and I recommend. One is talking about the two slave trade, the triangle slave trade and the Saharan slave trade. And after the slavery, Africans experienced the colonization where in 1843, the Berlin Conference, they partitioned Africa and they shared for themselves. Another one talking about the indigenous slavery Africans were practicing from 15th century to 19th century. That one was already existing before the Europeans came here. So today, we are not going to do anymore. We are returning back to where we came from. So please, yes, you check your head. I'm here. So you can see the difference.
Very different.
You can see the difference between the two sections, right? So
Will drive you crazy.
So condemn self for the
So people died here.
yes, I'm coming to talk about it, right? So people died a lot, yes. So condemn self for the African freedom fighters. Those who want to free themselves from various dangers. When you are caught, you are brought in here without giving food or water. When you died, you are thrown into the ocean. So no one came in here and survived. Imagine 20 people are brought in here and the person beside you is no more. And you're waiting for your own death. This horse here was not a source of ventilation. This is the people. When someone dies, they come and pit and throw the body into the ocean. So no one came in here and survived. Imagine 20 people brought in here. And the person beside you is no more.
So what was that called?
A source of ventilation for the
Other side.
other side. And at the same time, apart from condemning self for Africans, it's also served as a prison for the sea pirates. Those who are capturing ships at the ocean. When you are caught, you are brought here to die. So no one came in here.